Hello everyone, and welcome to the 190th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Late Night with the Devil. Within this story, we find a bevy of themes and messages aimed at posing us one simple question. How could one man go so wrong, and cause so much pain to all those around him, and ruin everything he had tried to achieve in the process? Well, when you invite dark forces into your life like Jack Delroy did, something horrific was bound to happen. And in this film, we're treated to a creative take on the demonic possession subgenre of horror, with the 70s talk show twist. Entertaining us with one wild ride that's expertly shot, researched, and acted, easily making it one of the best horror films made in the last decade. In this video, we're going to explore all that went into making this fateful episode of Night Owls with Jack Delroy, combing through all the details we're given surrounding the events of this film so we can better understand what went into the manifestation of the demonic forces that destroyed the many lives that they touched. But before we get started with the show, let's take a short break with our sponsor for this video, Rocket Money. In this day and age where every penny counts more than it ever did, it's important that we're on top of our finances. But even for the most financially illiterate amongst us, things can sometimes fall to the wayside as life presents you with one of its many hurdles. Enter Rocket Money, the #1 personal finance app out there that helps to carry the burden for you in so many ways when it comes to managing your money. With Rocket Money, you gain access to a bevy of streamlined tools like a budget management feature, and you can even upload a photo of any of your bills, like your cable and phone bills, to the app to let Rocket Money negotiate them for you to get a better rate. One of my favorite features though has to be their subscription canceller. It seems like everything out there wants to get a subscription out of you, and while subscriptions are fantastic when you want them, when you don't, well, that little bit of extra money getting siphoned out of your account each month without you even knowing can really add up. For example, I recently combed through my bank account to see if there were any I'd forgotten to cancel, and I learned that I had some mysterious $10 subscription from a company I didn't recognize. Well, Rocket Money did, and with just a few taps, they canceled it for me, which saved me hours of headache as well as a bit of cash in the process. But don't just take my word for it. Start taking control of your finances today with Rocket Money by clicking the link down below or by heading to rocketmoney.com/file to get started for free with Rocket Money. That's right, start taking control of your finances with Rocket Money completely free by heading to rocketmoney.com/file or by clicking the link down below. Thank you, Rocket Money, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's begin. A lot of what this film is trying to accomplish is rooted in the tumultuous atmosphere in the United States in the 1970s. In the opening scene of the film, we're given a montage featuring several of the hot-button issues that envelop the country during this decade. Things like the controversy surrounding the ongoing Vietnam War and the many protests occurring on a daily basis decrying said war, the Watergate scandal and Nixon's impeachment and subsequent resignation, the frequent gas shortages and increase in oil prices, and of course, the rise of serial killers and cults that indicated to many Americans that a dire moral backsliding was beginning to occur, the beginnings of the satanic panic that still influences popular discourse to this very day. Part of this new wave of unrest and strife was attributed to a shift in American culture away from the communitarian values of the past towards individualism, an atmosphere of social evolution that sparked the inspiration for author Tom Wolfe's famous essay, The Me Decade and the Third Great Awakening, which expands on this notion and coined the term Me Decade to refer to the 1970s. It's a fascinating read, and I'll link this essay in its entirety down in the description if you'd like to give it a read. But in essence, the individual was becoming more important to the average citizen than the overall community, which will be important to keep in mind as we move forward with this video. In this era of increased social unrest, needless to say, the American people were restless, and with a constant stream of news being beamed into every American home by virtue of the relatively new household device that is the television, a device that let them in on what horrors and hardships were occurring around them on a daily basis, they were in desperate need of something to distract them. Late-night talk shows attempted to alleviate some of these pains, giving adults all across the nation something with which they could unwind at the end of their day and distract them with before they drifted off to face the next set of misfortunes that they'd have to deal with the following day. And in this story, Night Owls featuring Jack Delroy became a great source of comfort to millions of Americans. Jack was an accomplished Chicago radio host who had recently been granted a spot hosting a late-night show for the fictional UBC network, and over the course of his first year helming the show, Jack would become one of the rising stars of the talk show world, and his impressive first-year run secured him a 5-year deal with the network. But Jack had a little secret, an advantage that allowed him to gain the upper hand in the entertainment world that others who have tried and failed to do as he has done weren't so fortunate to have: membership in the Bohemian Club. Or as most of you will be more familiar with, a ticket to the yearly celebration many powerful men across the world attend at the campground this club operates, the Bohemian Grove. The film does touch on the history of the club and the Grove a bit, but let's talk about it a little bit more in depth to gain a better understanding of what exactly they do and what they're about. There have been many wild conspiracy theories formulated over the 150+ years the Bohemian Club has existed, and considering the mystery surrounding this clandestine celebration, it's easy to see why. Founded in 1872 by a group of journalists, artists, and musicians, the Bohemian Club has grown into an organization that's counted numerous influential figures amongst its ranks, like businessmen, scientists, academics, and even former US presidents. Though outside business is supposedly shunned at the club's yearly retreats at the Bohemian Grove, many careers and high-profile relationships have reportedly been formed here, with many future US presidents gaining valuable support and resources due to their membership in the club, for example. And it's been said that several historical world events were orchestrated on the Grove's hallowed grounds, which is evident by a Manhattan Project planning meeting that occurred at the Grove, which was attended by Robert Oppenheimer himself. Aside from this star-studded membership list and the covert coordination of world events though, what really catapulted the Bohemian Grove into conspiratorial fame were rumors of occult rituals that occur at their yearly celebrations. Rumors, which aren't actually rumors. Every year when members of the Bohemian Club meet at the Grove, they partake in a ceremonial ritual called the Cremation of Care. From Wikipedia, the ceremony involves the poling across a lake of a small boat containing an effigy of Care called Dulcare. Dark hooded figures receive from the ferryman the effigy, which is placed on an altar and, at the end of the ceremony, set on fire. This cremation symbolizes that members are banishing the dull cares of conscience. At the time the script was developed, the primary meaning of the word care was synonymous with worry, having more negative connotations than in modern times, when it tends to be associated more positively with compassion. The ceremony takes place in front of the Owl Shrine, a 40-foot hollow owl statue made of concrete over steel supports. The moss and lichen-covered statue simulates a natural rock formation, yet holds electrical and audio equipment within it. During the ceremony, a recording is used as the voice of the owl. For many years, the recorded voice was club guest Walter Cronkite. Music and pyrotechnics accompany the ritual for dramatic effect. Now, to what degree this ceremony is just a celebration or an actual communion with dark forces is heavily debated. But considering this club and its events involve powerful people planning powerful events who also take the time to cavort around a 40-foot owl idol, one would be forgiven for having suspicions about such an organization. And in this film, we're given far more to work with regarding the Bohemian Club than mere suspicion. If you'll notice, I said that the Bohemian Club performs their ceremony in front of a massive owl statue, and well, it just so happens that the show Jack Delroy helms is called Night Owls, complete with an owl logo as its symbol. Now, Night Owls is a pretty catchy name for a late-night talk show, and if this were any other show headlined by any other person, this name and emblem would be nothing more than a cute little name aimed at capturing audiences' hearts and minds. However, there's an equal amount of mystery surrounding Jack Delroy's involvement in the Bohemian Club as there is with the organization itself, and considering all the Grove-based imagery that's strewn about the film, I think we're given enough to go off of here to fill in the blanks surrounding Jack Delroy's success, and what went so wrong with everything he tried to do. Jack likely attained his membership in the club through the contacts he made while he was a radio host in Chicago, and after attending his first Grove celebration, Jack made a deal with the head of the UBC TV studio that greenlit a pilot for a new talk show he wanted to start. However, Jack didn't just make a deal with this executive, he also made a pact with otherworldly forces by participating in one of the club's rituals. A ritual that involved Jack's submission to an entity that was speaking through a man dressed in an unsettling owl costume. What this did was ensure that the deal Jack had made wouldn't just start him in the business, but guarantee his show's success from the outset, giving his numbers the mystical boost they'd need in order to compete with giants like Johnny Carson and his Tonight Show. But there was something preventing Jack from overtaking his more well-established rival in the industry, himself. Occult powers can only evidently get you so far, and if you don't have the personal gravitas or proper format needed to impress viewers as well as industry professionals, then you're still going to run into a bit of trouble in your work, especially if you're vying for that coveted #1 spot like Jack was. Along with his inadequacies though, Jack would have to contend with something far more despair-inducing: the price one has to pay for entertaining the dark forces that fostered his success. Gaining notoriety that an entertainment world spotlight inevitably brings to a man in his position, Jack met and fell in love with his future wife Madeline not long after he started his show, and he was fortunate enough to enjoy 5 years of blissful marriage to the love of his life. But 5 years would be all Jack would get, as Madeline, a woman who had never smoked a day in her life, suddenly came down with a case of terminal lung cancer. Now, secondhand smoke was rampant during this era, so it's definitely possible that she developed cancer through frequent inhalation of other cigarette smoke. But everything we're given in this story indicates that Minnie's life and the despair her absence would bring Jack was part of the price that he would need to eventually pay after he signed his soul over to the dark forces that are allied to the Bohemian Club. They didn't say when, they didn't say how, but a price would need to be paid nonetheless. So Jack fell into a state of despair, his world crumbling around him as he continued to fail in achieving that #1 spot he so craved. But now he had to do so without his rock there beside him to keep him centered. And Jack felt hopeless. For a month following Minnie's demise, Jack completely disappeared from the public spotlight. But to the surprise of everyone, once that month had passed, Jack returned to Night Owls to continue pursuing his dreams. Now, what Jack was doing during his month-long absence is unknown, but I have a theory. With his show in shambles and his life in a similar state, Jack returned to the Grove to commune with the powers that be, to ask them for more help, and to ask them why everything is going wrong for him, and how he could possibly make it better. So Jack made another deal, signing another piece of himself away in exchange for more power. However, they still couldn't do it all for him, as Jack Delroy, dark powers or not, was still Jack Delroy. But this time, if Jack couldn't manage to become #1 on his own, well then this shadowy entity would fulfill that part of the bargain and make sure it happened for him, no matter the cost. So Jack pivoted his show to include more sensationalism, courting controversy in an attempt to give Night Owls something unique that they could build off of, to get ahead of their competition. But ratings continued to fall, and Jack was no closer to the top spot than he was prior to his wife's demise, or this new shift in the show. Unfortunately for Jack, that was all about to change. Now, I've mentioned the powers Jack has been courting at a few different points in this video, but now it's time that we get a little more familiar with the entity that Jack has inadvertently entered into a pact with, Abraxus. I found an article by Josh Chandler Morris over on Medium titled "Who is Abraxus?" that will give us some insight into just who or what exactly Abraxus is. Abraxus, the god described by ancient Gnostics as the god above all gods, remains elusive and mysterious despite the ever-presence of its name in mystic traditions, occultism, and even popular culture. Abraxus captured the imagination and interest of many of the 20th century's great thinkers, musicians, and artists, from Carl Jung to Hermann Hesse, and even figures like Carlos Santana. His name became synonymous with a desire to pursue individuation, the Jungian method of integrating all conscious and unconscious aspects of the self. The name Abraxus is woven into our mythic cultural imagination, and yet clear information about its nature is hard to come by. Described as a demon by some and the highest of gods by others, it is partly their enigmatic and esoteric nature that makes the mystery of their origin and symbolism so enticing. Much of the uncertainty is due, at least in part, to the censorship and eradication of many Gnostic texts by early Christians who saw them as heretical. However, even for the most curious reader with a grasp of how Abraxus has been understood, it has to be said that there is something inherently ineffable and abstruse about them. I will draw heavily on Carl Jung's study of Gnosticism and Abraxus specifically, as his access to direct text and his years of study have provided me with the clearest picture of this somewhat ineffable deity. Here is an excerpt from Jung's 7 Sermons to the Dead from the Red Book, which perhaps gives the clearest picture of the nature of Abraxus. Abraxus is the sun, and at the same time, the eternally sucking gorge of the void, the belittling and dismembering devil. The power of Abraxus is twofold, but ye see it not, because for your eyes, the warring opposites of this power are extinguished. What the God-Son speaketh is life, what the devil speaketh is death, but Abraxus speaketh that hallowed and accursed word, which is life and death at the same time. Abraxus begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word, and in the same act. Wherefore is Abraxus terrible. It is splendid as the lion in the instant he strikes down his victim. It is beautiful as a day of spring. It is the great Pan himself, and also the small one. It is Priapos. It is the monster of the underworld, a 1,000-armed polyp, coiled knot of winged serpents, frenzy. It is the hermaphrodite of the earliest beginning. It is the lord of the toads and frogs, which live in the water and go upon the land, whose course ascendeth at noon and at midnight. It is abundance that seeketh union with emptiness. It is holy begetting. It is love, and love's murder. It is the saint and his betrayer. It is the brightest light of day, and the darkest night of madness. To look upon it is blindness. To know it is sickness. To worship it is death. To fear it is wisdom. To resist it not is redemption. God dwelleth behind the sun, the devil behind the night. What God bringeth forth out of the light, the devil sucketh into the night. But Abraxus is the world, its becoming, and its passing. Upon every gift that cometh from the God-Son, the devil layeth his curse. Everything that ye entreat from the God-Son begetteth a deed of the devil. Everything that ye create with the God-Son giveth effective power to the devil. That is terrible Abraxus. It is the mightiest creature, and in it, the creature is afraid of itself. It is the manifest opposition of Creatura to the Pleroma and its nothingness. It is the son's horror of the mother. It is the mother's love for the son. It is the delight of the earth and the cruelty of the heavens. Before its countenance, man becometh like stone. Before it there is no question and no reply. It is the life of Creatura. It is the operation of distinctiveness. It is the love of man. It is the speech of man. It is the appearance and the shadow of man. It is illusory reality. This description sounds radically different from the modern Christian conception of an omnibenevolent God. Abraxus instead incorporates all. He/she is total unity between everything that we differentiate. They are both the highest good and the most frightful evil, masculine and feminine, truth and lie, light and dark. In modern Christian myth, we've ascribed all that is good to God and all that is evil to the devil. But this conception of Abraxas is a total unity of a world of all possibilities, a pre-moral whole. In this sense, Abraxas seems to be a manifestation of non-duality, the Eastern concept of primordial, absolute experience of unity, an experience of consciousness free from the illusory perception of separateness. This is the state often described poetically by mystics as the ground of being, or by psychedelic users and meditators as ego death. In some ways, this reminds me of Hindu cosmology. We often think of Hinduism as being a polytheistic religion, but actually, the many gods are often described as the many aspects or incarnations of the Godhead. In Hinduism, there is a recognition that not only is there a benevolent aspect to the divine, but there is also the terrifying, the destructive, and the dark. We can see this reflected in Kali and Shiva, neither of which we would describe as bad. They are necessary aspects of the theater of life. They are beyond our daily conceptions of reality, but they represent death and destruction in the process of starting anew. Perhaps we can also see this in the Old Testament, where God appears to be a more complicated figure who's capable of fits of rage and damaged pride. In this sense, the God of the Old Testament contained a mythology that accounted for our genuine experience of life, with all its inexplicable hardship and uncertainty. According to Gnosticism, Abraxas was the god beyond all gods. The God of the Old Testament is described as the demiurge, a degenerate god conceived through a failed attempt by Sophia to procreate without the masculine element. In this sense, all other gods are subject to the distinctions, values, and preferences that we make in our lives, whereas Abraxas stands alone in an undifferentiated state of absolute wholeness, with the exclusion of nothing. M.J. Dorian argues that Carl Jung believed Abraxas to symbolically represent the individuation process, the journey of each individual to incorporate all aspects of themselves, conscious and unconscious, to rediscover the whole and true self. There is speculation that this is what Jung understood God to be, the integrated self. Carl Jung repeatedly warns us not to worship Abraxas. I find this interesting. Deity worship is a pretty common occurrence in the New Age and occultism, and the traditions they draw from seem varied and unfettered. However, I wonder what it is that is to be feared from the worship of Abraxas. Well, from what we're given in this film, it would seem there's plenty to fear regarding worship of Abraxas, as such worship brought a cult dedicated to him to perilous ruin, along with many of the people present on Night Owl's Halloween episode, that fateful day in 1977. Now, at one point in the film, when Lily is being introduced to us, Carmichael Haig calls Abraxas a showman who craves an audience, which he claims is made evident by the fact that the traditional magician incantation, abracadabra, is derived from his name. I couldn't really find anything that indicates that Abraxas is a showman, though abracadabra is indeed derived from his name. Regardless, we are given quite the show here, and more important than Abraxas' connection with a common incantation is something that Dr. June says about the demonic possession of her patient Lily. Before Lily and June enter the stage, we're shown a short clip of documentary footage detailing how Lily came under Dr. June's care, and how she's written a novel called Conversations with the Devil that caught Jack's attention. Lily was the sole survivor of a mass immolation undertaken by the members of the Church of Abraxas, a supposed satanic cult that engaged in human sacrifice and blood-based rituals in order to commune with Abraxas, whom many refer to as a demon. It would seem that the members of this cult finally managed to conjure one such demon and place it inside of Lily, and after she was recovered from the ruins of this home, she entered Dr. June's care and has both been her patient and study subject ever since. Considering these cultists were attempting to commune with Abraxas, one might assume as Jack did that Lily houses Abraxas within her mind. But Dr. June corrects Jack and states that it's not Abraxas who's possessing Lily, but a minor deity that serves him. Now, we just learned that Abraxas is considered the god above all gods, an entity that lords over the Judeo-Christian God and all that he's created as the near supreme being of the universe. And if the god that so many know so well is but a minor deity in the pantheon overseen by Abraxas, well then another minor deity must be the devil that opposes said god, Lucifer, the morning star. Not only do we have the title of this film to go off of when making this assumption, along with what we just learned about the devil being the night, but considering we're clearly dealing with an immensely powerful entity here, one that can't be subdued by the invocation of Mesopotamian deities, as we saw Dr. June attempting, or by the presence of a crucifix, as Gus attempted shortly before his demise, I think it's fair to claim that what the Church of Abraxas managed to do was something that others could only attempt, the summoning of the devil himself. And they were able to do so by gaining the favor of the one who rules above even the god who created said devil. Also, we learned during Lily's first possession that Jack has encountered this entity before amongst the tall trees, and considering whomever the members of the Bohemian Club pay homage to is able to grant them unprecedented power, I think it's also safe to assume that the devil would be the one who could accomplish that for them. For who would have the power to grant such unholy might to the rich and powerful, but the supposed source of all evil in our own realm? So essentially what we're dealing with here is the following: a man who made an agreement with the devil, who then suffered the consequences of this association through the untimely death of his wife. During the course of his mourning period, he bargained for more power with the same entity, strengthening his bond with him and significantly increasing the cost that would be associated with such reinforcement. Jack was then drawn to a book penned by Dr. June due to the connection he has with Lily and the devil inside her. And from there, he chose to invite her to his studio in order to capitalize on the sensationalism that such a guest would bring to his show. However, this invitation into his studio was seemingly partially orchestrated by the members of the Bohemian Club, something we haven't discussed yet. Several times over the course of this story, the camera pans specifically to this man in the audience that's wearing a skeleton costume. And at the beginning of this episode, Jack had attempted to speak with this man, but received no response from him when doing so. This mystery man, along with several other costume guests, later appears in the hallucination that Jack is being tormented with when the devil, with possible support from Abraxus, unleashes a torrent of psychic energy onto the people present in the studio. And in this hallucination, we find Jack reliving the ritual he undertook when he first made a pact with the devil in the presence of some of the club members who have come to ensure that Jack receives what he was promised. And that's what all of this really is when it comes down to it: the fulfillment of a dark promise that's fulfilled in one of the most horrific ways imaginable, through a technicolor display of extreme demonic possession and the murder of several innocent people that would catapult this episode and all involved with this show into dread infamy. But aside from the machinations of the Church of Abraxus and Jack's foolish pact with the devil, what is the root of all the evil in this film? Well, it goes back to something we discussed at the beginning of this video: the Me Decade and the rise of selfishness. Jack Delroy, like all of us, had big dreams, and like all of us, he vowed to do whatever it took to make those dreams a reality. He didn't think about what that would do to himself or those around him. He could only think about his own desires and how wonderful it would be if his dreams came true. So Jack Delroy didn't pay any mind to the consequences, thinking, as all self-centered people do, that he would be able to take the punches as they were thrown at him and somehow come out on the other side on top. What really sealed Jack's fate was that second communion he made with the devil, and while that was beyond idiotic, it's understandable why he felt the need to do so. Though Jack gained a significant advantage in his industry through the occult, he remained a middling showman who couldn't quite seem to take his art form to the next level, and this only instilled within Jack a sense of inadequacy as he was constantly bombarded with less than stellar ratings, negative coverage from the press, and the pressure that the overall public opinion can bring to people in his position. When you're not quite the greatest at what you do, but not quite the worst either, you constantly ask yourself why you aren't as great as the greatest in your field, why things never seem to go your way, what you could have done better, and how you can elevate your craft to the next level to make it so you're recognized as one of the masters of that craft. And it's understandable why these feelings would spur Jack into doing whatever it took to improve his prospects in life and in his profession. While Jack didn't necessarily intend for such horrific things to occur when entertaining these dark forces, it still stands that it was his selfishness that sealed his fate, the fate of his wife, and all the people who died during the course of his Halloween episode. And I am a firm believer in the idea that the root of all evil is not money or power, but the thing that fuels our desires for greater things and our subsequent willingness to obtain those things, no matter the cost: selfishness. At the root of any evil action, you'll find that any given person's reasoning for committing evil acts originates in the self. I want more money, so I'm going to take it. I want more power, so I'm going to abuse everyone around me to get it, and so on and so forth. Now don't get me wrong, it is not evil to be selfish. For example, if you're eating a meal and some stranger comes along asking for a bite, you refusing to give them one would technically be a selfish thing to do. But it's your food that you bought with your own money that you are more than welcome to do with as you see fit. So I'm not trying to claim that selfishness is inherently evil. Rather, all evil is inherently selfish. If you look at any evil person or action, you can always trace that evil's origins back to some sort of selfish desire. One interesting perversion of both selfishness and community that this film touches on a bit are cults and their machinations. Part of the piece of the puzzle of the suffering that occurs in this film is the actions of the Church of Abraxus, a group that engaged in ritual human sacrifice that placed the devil inside of Lily. Now, a cult is typically organized by one person, or a group of people, who aren't really the greatest people, who are looking to take advantage of people's loneliness and desire for community in order to create a power base for themselves that they can then abuse later on down the line, or brainwash into committing horrific acts, like the members of the Church of Abraxus did, taking something noble, a desire for a community, and warping it into a shadow of what it actually means to have a healthy and thriving community. Jack Delroy isn't necessarily guilty of operating in the same manner as a cult, but he is guilty of willingly signing up for one in order to obtain more power, adopting the "don't worry about what's going on around you or those closest to you, but the worry about me and what I want" mentality, a willingness to forgo the well-being of anyone else for the man who wanted to be number one, Jack Delroy. And in a way, Jack's selfishness is responsible for ruining the community that he had built up around him. And well, make a deal with the devil once, and you might lose an arm. Do it twice, and well, you best expect that your life is on the line from that point on. And no one, not even Jack Delroy, should be too surprised when the end result of your invitation of sinister forces into your world ends up causing that world to be completely destroyed at the hands of that very same evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Late Night with the Devil? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, my patrons, and anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.